What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Nerdy Professor Podcast, where we talk about everything black, bold, and beautiful. I am your host, the Nerdy Professor. In our last episode, we explored the powerful legacy of the Black Power movement. Today, we're going to shift our focus to the contemporary movement that continues to shape the discourse on racial justice, the Black Lives Matter movement. This is the finale for the Methods of Resistance series. Let's get into it. The Black Lives Matter movement emerged in response to long-standing systemic racism and police brutality in the United States. It gained significant traction following the acquittal of George Zimmerman and the shooting and death of Trayvon Martin in 2013. Trayvon's tragic death, and then the calls for justice that went across the country served as a catalyst for the movement's formation. In 2014, the fatal shooting of Michael Brown by police officers in Ferguson, Missouri, further fueled outrage and mobilization. The protests and demonstrations that followed highlighted the disproportionate use of force against African Americans and underscored the urgent need for systemic change. One of the movement's co-founders, Alisa Garza, expressed the sentiment behind Black Lives Matter when she wrote, "Black Lives Matter isn't just about police violence. It is also about the ways in which Black lives are devalued in our society." Patrisse Cullors, another co-founder, emphasized the importance of centering the experience of Black, queer, and trans individuals within the movement, highlighting the intersectionality of race, gender, and sexuality. Opal Tometi, the third co-founder, underscored the global reach of Black Lives Matter, emphasizing the interconnectedness of struggles for racial justice around the world. The founders of the Black Lives Matter movement were driven by their experiences of racial discrimination and social injustice. They sought to create a platform that centered on affirming the humanity and dignity of Black lives, challenging police violence, and advocating for broader societal reforms. Since its inception, Black Lives Matter has sparked important conversations and mobilized people to take action against racial injustice. It has evolved into a decentralized network of activists, organizers, and allies working to address a wide range of issues from police violence to economic inequality. The movement's use of social media and grassroots organizing has played an instrumental part in amplifying its message and galvanizing support. Through protests, demonstrations, and community organizing efforts, Black Lives Matter has challenged the status quo and demanded accountability from those in power. The rallying cry of Black Lives Matter has become a powerful symbol of resistance and solidarity, sparking important conversations about race, privilege, and systemic injustice. Another critical objective has been to dismantle systemic racism across various sectors of society. This encompasses addressing disparities in education, healthcare, employment, housing, and other areas where racial inequalities persist. Black Lives Matter has highlighted the need for policy changes and structural reforms that promote justice for all. Over time, the goals of the Black Lives Matter movement have evolved in response to ongoing challenges and emerging issues. As the movement gained momentum, it expanded its focus to include broader issues of racial injustice and inequality. This evolution has seen Black Lives Matter engage in campaigns and initiatives that seek to address intersecting forms of discrimination based on race, gender, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. Clarity in goals has been crucial to the effectiveness of the Black Lives Matter movement. By clearly articulating its objectives, Black Lives Matter has been able to mobilize diverse communities, build coalitions with other social movements, and influence public discourse and public agendas. One of the defining features of the Black Lives Matter movement has been its adept use of social media platforms to spread awareness, mobilize supporters, and amplifying marginalized voices. Social media has served as a powerful tool for BLM activists to share information, organize protests, and document instances of racial injustice in real time. Platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram have been instrumental in generating widespread attention to cases of police brutality and racial discrimination. Viral campaigns such as Black Lives Matter, Say Her Name, have sparked global conversation, galvanized public support, and challenged mainstream narratives about race and justice. Through social media, BLM has been able to circumvent traditional media gatekeepers and directly engage with a global audience, fostering solidarity and collective action across diverse communities. BLM has organized a variety of protests and demonstrations to mobilize supporters, raise awareness, and pressure authorities to address systemic issues of racial injustice. These protests take various forms, including peaceful marches, rallies, die-ins, and acts of civil disobedience. Civil disobedience has been a key tactic used by BLM activists to challenge unjust laws, policies, and practices. Nonviolent acts of civil disobedience, such as blockades and shutdowns of public spaces or transportation hubs, aim to disrupt business as usual and draw attention to institutionalized forms of racism. Die-ins have been particularly expressive forms of protest that BLM activists have used. Marches and rallies serve as a visible display of solidarity and collective resistance, drawing attention to specific cases of police violence or broader issues of racial inequality. These events often attract media coverage and public scrutiny, amplifying the movement's message and demands. Beyond direct action and protest, BLM has engaged in targeted legal and policy advocacy to influence legislation, policies, and institutionalized practices at local, state, and federal levels. Activists work in collaboration with legal organizations, advocacy groups, and community stakeholders to draft and promote reforms that address systemic racism and police violence. By deliberately violating laws or regulations perceived as unjust, BLM activists seek to provoke a response from authorities, highlight contradictions in the legal system, and galvanize public support for systemic change. Civil disobedience underscores the moral urgency of the movement's demands and emphasizes the power of collective action in affecting social transformation. Efforts have focused on advocating for police accountability measures such as enhanced civilian oversight, mandatory body cameras, and de-escalation training. BLM has also campaigned for reforms in areas such as criminal justice, education, housing, and healthcare, aiming to dismantle structural inequalities that perpetuate racial disparities. Through strategic litigation, lobbying efforts, and community organizing, BLM has sought to translate grassroots mobilization into tangible policy changes that advance racial justice and equality. One of the foundational aspects of the Black Lives Matter movement is its emphasis on grassroots organizing and community engagement. BLM activists have worked tirelessly to build local chapters and networks that foster support, solidarity, and collective action within communities affected by racial injustice. Community engagement initiatives range from neighborhood meetings and town halls to collaborative partnerships with local organizations, faith communities, and businesses. These efforts aim to cultivate trust, amplify community voices, and mobilize residents to advocate for systemic change. BLM has prioritized education and awareness as critical tools for combating racial injustice and systemic racism. Activists organize workshops, seminars, public forums, and educational campaigns to inform communities about the historical roots and contemporary manifestations of racial inequality. These programs aim to empower individuals with knowledge, foster critical thinking about race and social justice issues, and inspire collective action. Topics covered include police brutality, mass incarceration, structural racism in education and healthcare, and strategies for advocating for change. In comparing the movement's strategies to the anime series My Hero Academia, we see parallels in the themes of heroism and activism. Just as characters in My Hero Academia use their quirks to combat discrimination and societal injustices, BLM activists engage in protest and advocacy to challenge systemic racism and advocate for equality. Both narratives emphasize the importance of community and solidarity. In My Hero, they form alliances to protect society, echoing how BLM fosters solidarity among activists and allies to amplify their voices against systemic challenges. Just as characters in My Hero undergo training to develop their abilities and understand their responsibilities, BLM promotes education and awareness about racial inequality to empower communities to mobilize support for their cause. Both narratives involve legal and policy advocacy. In My Hero, Heroes work within legal frameworks to uphold justice, similar to how BLM activists advocate for policy reforms to address systemic racism and police violence. However, the movement has also faced backlash and criticism. Critics have accused Black Lives Matter as divisive, militant, or anti-police, reflecting broader societal debates about race, law enforcement, and activism. Some opponents also argue that BLM's emphasis on systemic racism and police brutality overlooks the complexities of law enforcement and undermines public safety. They assert that the movement's focus on racial disparities can impair tensions and hinder efforts toward constructive dialogue and reform. Criticism has also been directed at specific tactics used by BLM activists, such as disruptive protests, civil disobedience, and direct confrontation with law enforcement. Critics contend that these tactics may alienate potential supporters and overshadow the movement's core message of racial justice. Despite facing opposition and resistance, both BLM and the Heroes from My Hero remain steadfast in their pursuit of justice and equality, inspiring hope and resilience among their supporters. In response to the critiques, BLM activists and supporters emphasize the urgent need to address systemic racism and disparities in policing, criminal justice, and broader societal institutions. They argue that challenging injustice and advocating for police reform are essential steps toward achieving equality and accountability. Efforts to address concerns include community dialogues, outreach initiatives, and collaborations with stakeholders to promote understanding and bridge divides. Internally, the Black Lives Matter movement grapples with organizational dynamics, leadership transitions, and maintaining unity amid diverse perspectives and priorities. The decentralized structure of BLM, characterized by local chapters and grassroots activism, presents both strengths and challenges in coordinating nationwide efforts. Organizational challenges include decision-making processes, resource allocation, and ensuring transparency and accountability within the movement. Disputes over strategy, messaging, and priorities can create tensions and disagreements among activists and chapters. To address internal challenges, BLM emphasizes principles of inclusivity, collective decision-making, and shared values of social justice and equality. The movement values diversity of perspectives and experiences, recognizing that different communities may face distinct challenges and priorities in the fight against racism. Strategies used to maintain unity and focus include regular communication, leadership and development program, and conflict resolution mechanisms. BLM chapters foster solidarity through mutual support, shared resources, and collaborative campaigns to amplify local and national advocacy efforts. It's important to recognize that Black Lives Matter is not just a slogan or hashtag. It's a movement for justice and liberation. It's a call to action to dismantle the systems of oppression that continue to spew violence and inequality against Black communities. Ultimately, both BLM and My Hero share a vision for a future where justice prevails, communities thrive, and individuals stand up against injustice to create a more equitable society. All right, that's it for this episode. Thank you for joining. I hope you learned something. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace.